thank you all for coming. Appreciate your taking the time. I know you have options, so. We're here for the truth, and you all may have heard of Joseph Goebbels, and he said that a lie repeated often enough becomes the truth. And that's pretty much what runs nutrition and medicine in this country, is a bunch of lies. My favorite author, Mark Twain, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And the acid test I use, particularly with doctors who don't know anything about it, I had a 20-minute exchange with a physician this morning, went to University of Michigan Medical School, very articulate guy. He'd never heard the word copper before. So it was a very interesting dialogue. The most important thing is the truth is not hiding, it's just in plain sight. But no one ever told you that. And so what I've done over the last 14 years is just uncover research that's existed from 1910 to the present day. And I didn't really set out to become a mineral expert. It's just once I realized what the problem was, I wasn't going to back down and not follow it through to its fruition. So the root cause protocol, I'm sure you all are familiar with it. It's all about harnessing oxygen. That's really what we focus on. We're trying to optimize energy. We're trying to clear exhaust. We're trying to catalyze enzymes. But the part that I think everyone needs to know is that copper is unique in its ability to combat all enemies. Bacteria, fungus, virus, and parasites. And what really crystallized it for me was back in April of 2020 when we were all pulling our hair out, wondering what's going on. I found an article from 2008 using copper to kill the SARS-CoV virus. And that's when I knew the whole thing was a scam. Copper and iron, easily dysregulated. I think you all know that. And all these complicated chemicals that run our body all respond to oxygen status. Well, who's regulating oxygen status? It's copper and iron. And what's important to know is that in the world of traditional Chinese medicine, copper is called the general and iron is called the foot soldier. Well, if you've ever seen the movie Patton, that's copper driving things, making things happen. And when the general's not around, the foot soldiers don't behave. And the iron works exactly the same way inside our body. If copper's not there to regulate it, it gets stuck in tissue, doesn't show up in the blood, and that's when people start taking iron supplements. Big problem on the planet. And then the rising and unchecked oxidative stress causes enzymes to stop working. That's what the whole basis of the book is about. Cure your fatigue, because energy production is down because copper is missing in the cells. And when oxidative stress builds, that's when we get symptoms. And then we take those symptoms to the doctor, and we empty our bag of symptoms on the doctor's desk, and he looks at it and he says, oh, I know, you've got XYZ syndrome. And because we're human, we're very gullible, and we believe that. There is no disease. It doesn't exist. And when I first said that 6 years ago on Facebook, I fully expected there was going to be this tidal wave of reaction, particularly on the part of doctors and nurses and all these practitioners. Guess how many people challenged my comment that there is no medical disease, there's only stress-induced mineral dysregulation that causes metabolic dysfunction. How many people challenged me? Not one person. There is no medical disease. It's all fatigue. It's all metabolic fatigue. Who knew? So what we're really trying to do with the RCP is optimize the conversion of oxygen into ATP. I think, do the slides are going to be available? Yeah, so I mean, I appreciate you wanting to, just trying to, I don't want to wear you out. But the whole idea is to minimize the exhaust. And in the same way that we drive cars, how many people drive a car? Does your car produce exhaust? Yeah, it does. And our cells do the exact same thing. The natural process of creating energy at a cellular level creates exhaust. It's called oxidants. Those are accidents with oxygen. It's called oxidative stress. Sometimes it's called reactive oxygen species. All the same thing. It's just all exhaust. But what's mind-boggling is that all the exhausts are cleared by a set of what are called antioxidant enzymes. Put on your thinking caps. What do you think the battery pack is for all the antioxidant enzymes? It's copper. Who knew? Absolutely amazing. And guess what's not taught in doctor school? There's a relationship there. So there's a famous article about aging. It's called The 9 Hallmarks of Aging. Phenomenal article. And the wheel represents all the 9 different parts. And it's a really interesting study. And you can see in the center is the aging process, starting out as an infant and then ending up as the old man. I think I'm somewhere between this guy and this guy. My 4 adult children think I'm the second guy. But in any event, the key is, this is the mitochondria, and they love copper. There's 40 quadrillion mitochondria in your body. That's 15 zeros. And every one of the mitochondria is supposed to have 50,000 atoms of copper. What's amazing to me is the distribution of that mitochondria is that the average cell has 500 mitochondria. Average liver cell, 2,000 mitochondria. Kidney cell, 4,000. Heart cell, 10,000 mitochondria. The mature egg in a woman's body, 600,000 mitochondria. And we have brain cells, neurons, that have 2 million mitochondria. Nobody talks about that. And they all need copper to run. The key is, as we age, if you get this slide, you will master your recovery from whatever ailments you have. As we age, we accumulate iron. Every day you're on the planet, you add 1 milligram of iron to your body. So take your age times 365, and that's how many thousands of milligrams of iron you have in your body. You should have about 4,000 to 5,000, and I'm confident everyone in this room has between 15 and 25,000 milligrams of iron. That's a lot of iron. And every day we're on the planet, we're losing copper. Why? Because it's not in the food system. The farming chemicals chelate copper. Food processing chelates copper. The medications that we were taking chelate copper. I didn't know any of this. I'm a former hospital guy. I thought people were really sick. And I find out, oh my gosh, the whole thing is it's a Ponzi scheme for Big Pharma. So this is the free radical theory of aging, is that free radicals, exhaust, build in our body, and things wear down. And the amount of iron in our body as we get older is vastly greater than the amount of iron we have when we start out. That's it. Now you understand the aging process. So what should you do? Well, read this book and then get the product called Recuperate, and that's my unending wit. Get it? Recuperate. Because you, yep. They love it, right? All right, so real quick, to give you a sense of how important copper and iron are. Everybody knows what that is, right? Okay, so what we're going to look at is, everyone knows about iron metabolism because all the articles in the internet talk about iron. Iron, iron, iron. There are thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of articles on iron metabolism. But there's also something called copper metabolism. Nobody knows about that. But even there, we only have hundreds of articles. There's a big difference between thousands of articles and hundreds of articles. But the key is this is the mechanism that regulates iron. And it's called HoloCP. Everyone knows what that is, right? So holo means it's full, and CP means ceruloplasmin. And that's a word that no doctor's ever heard in their training. Ceruloplasmin is the protein that has 8 copper atoms inside it, and it runs and regulates the entire body. One of the biggest proteins in the human body, 8 copper atoms inside each molecule? Are you kidding me? And there's actually, when you get into it, there's 20 copper binding sites in the DNA to make ceruloplasmin. Why is that significant? Because that means there's 20 different expressions of ceruloplasmin. Oh, you want skates? We can do skates. You want a skateboard? Oh, I got skateboard. You want a bike? You want a motorbike? You want a motorcycle? No, you want a car. No, you want a sports car. Oh, you'd rather have a boat? I've got a plane. How about a rocket? And this protein can change just like when we were growing up, we had transformers, or our kids had transformers. This protein can change its shape 20 different ways to neutralize the exhaust in our body. There are dozens of articles about ceruloplasmin. You get the drift? Thousands, hundreds, dozens. So this is some of the most important information that should be taught. I think it should be taught in practitioner school. I've vowed that I'm going to start a medical school, and it's going to be 3 days long. Day 1 is going to be learn how to measure minerals. Day 2, learn how to replace minerals. And day 3, learn how to play golf. The most important thing to understand is that iron does not regulate itself. That's the biggest lie, or among the biggest lies on the planet. This idea that iron, it'll take care of itself. How many of you have been around a 4-year-old? Anybody? Yeah, right? Okay. Important question. Iron is like a 4-year-old with a hammer. Who would give a 4-year-old a hammer and then go next door and have a cup of coffee with your neighbor? No one in their right mind. And who's copper in that household? It's the mom. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And this is one of my favorite quotes. The precise mechanism by which ceruloplasmin promotes iron efflux, the removal of iron from macrophages, those are Pac-Men that love to gobble up dying red blood cells, and other cells, remains uncertain. This is by a world-renowned clinician up in Canada, Dr. Sheftel, in 2012. We're not really sure how it works. Really? Let's dig a little deeper. We start with copper, then it's got to be turned into copper 1. Then it's got to get through the front door, which is copper transporter 1. That's the front door to let copper in. Then there's something called glutathione. I'm sure many of you have heard of glutathione. Well, it binds up with copper. It's got to be synced with copper. You can't make it without copper. Then this protein, ATOX1, antioxidant protein number 1, it's the chaperone for bringing copper into the cell. It's a really big deal. So we've got a front door, but we have a chaperone, and the chaperone feeds this. It's called a copper pump, 8TP7B. You all are now getting physiology that exceeds anything physicians got throughout their entire 4 years of school. And it's pretty basic. We're just trying to get copper inside the cell. Because once that pump is fired up, it gets ceruloplasmin filled with copper, and then guess what you can do? You can regulate iron. And if you don't have the pump, you can't regulate iron. And what happens with that? Iron's going to look low in the blood, but it's stuck in the tissue. That's the mistake that's made worldwide. How many people have been told they were anemic? All lies. We're on a planet where the number one element on the planet is iron. And prior to COVID, I was convinced that humans were the most evolved species. Now I'm not sure. But in order to believe in iron deficiency anemia, you have to accept this premise. The most evolved species on the planet cannot metabolize the number one element on the planet. Makes no sense at all. And what's missing is copper. Copper is the general telling the foot soldier what to do. You cannot make heme. You cannot make hemoglobin. You cannot load iron into hemoglobin. There are 1,000 things that relate to iron metabolism, but they all require copper. But no one ever talks about these critical proteins. So, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to get a little bumpy. You've no doubt have heard about glutathione deficiency. Guess what it's caused by? Lack of copper. In the research, silver is very hard on this copper doorway, just so you know. So when Dr. Sheftel tells us that the mechanism by which ceruloplasmin promotes iron efflux remains uncertain, that's a bold-faced lie. Because this is what I've figured out in 14 years of research. I'm sure there are some real talented scientists out there who can run circles around me. And this is the dirty little secret behind all conditions on the planet. There's 32,000 conditions in the Merck Manual. What's the Merck Manual? That's the Bible for medicine. 32,000 conditions. Guess what? One word is not in there. Copper. It's like reading the Bible and there's no reference to Jesus Christ. So it doesn't make any sense at all. So this is one of my favorite cartoons. This is based on this book, The Iron Elephant. I'm right there in the room and no one even acknowledges me. Everyone in this room has too much iron in your body. No offense. We didn't know what they had done to the food system, the farming system, the pharmaceutical system. And so the iron builds up in our body. And it's a real serious problem. So we're here to talk about sugar. This is a famous article that was written by Gary Taubes, who's a very prolific writer. He's the only science writer to win the Science Writing Award 3 times in a row. And he wrote a very important book a number of years ago called Good Calories, Bad Calories. It's the best book I've ever read. If you're looking for a nice, thick, juicy book to read on science, it's about 600 pages, but it's beautifully written. And Gary Taubes has been a very harsh critic of sugar, and I didn't know that until more recently. Great book. So, is sugar toxic? Was the Pope Catholic? Yeah, right. Do bears sleep in the woods? Huh? Are doctors ill-informed? Is Fauci for real? Is the world lost in a psyops? Okay. This slide is a very important slide, and this is the whole kit and caboodle in one slide. And if you can remember this slide, you're going to benefit for the rest of your life. So what we see is a triangle with iron, sugar, and vitamin D. No, vitamin D is not your friend as a supplement. It's very important to have it, being naturally produced, but as a supplement, no. And then the opposing triangle, we've got copper and fat and vitamin A, retinol. And what's really important to understand is that iron has a very powerful relationship with sugar, and copper has a very powerful relationship with fat. Why do you think so many people eat a low-fat diet? Because they took copper out of our system. They took retinol out of our system. How did that happen? When President Eisenhower had his first heart attack, September 24th, 1955. First of 8 heart attacks. And Ancel Keys, famous physiologist, took cholesterol out of our diet. You remember the Time magazine commercial with the bacon, the frowny bacon and the eggs, right? They took cholesterol out, but what they were really taking out of our diet was vitamin A, retinol. Nobody knew that there's this incredible relationship between copper and vitamin A. In the same way that there's an incredible relationship between vitamin D and iron. You don't want to take vitamin D supplements. It's going to get your iron all worked up. It's going to get it stored even deeper. You don't want stored iron. Trust me, you want circulating iron. So, copper is all about electric. Iron is all about magnetic. Electromagnetism, we got to have both inside the body. It's very important to have both. And it only takes a little bit of copper to regulate a lot of iron. There's 100 milligrams of copper in our body. That's a tiny amount. That 100 milligrams fits on the head of a 1-inch stick pin. And then we've got thousands of milligrams of iron in our body. Again, back to generals and foot soldiers. Iron is really good at creating gravity. Copper is really good at creating levity, the expansion of the universe, based on copper. The premise of conventional medicine, attack the guest, is based on iron, because it's all based on enemies feeding on the iron. All the enemies in the body feed on iron. All of the ancient healing paradigms are based on one concept, strengthen the host. What's the fastest way to strengthen the host? Do a blood donation, get rid of some iron, and start focusing on copper. Do the root cause protocol. So what happened? They took fat, copper, and retinol out of our diet. We didn't see it coming. Over the course of a century, that's exactly what's happened. And what did they increase? Sugar, vitamin D, and iron. They've been adding iron filings, not organic iron, iron filings, to our wheat flour since 1941. Increased it 50% in '69. There's only 9 different forms of iron being added to the food. Only 9. How many of them cause cancer? All 9. So a study was done on how many people eat cereal? Just not anymore. Yeah. You won't now. But the thing is, there's a lot of iron in sugar, or a lot of iron and sugar in cereal. And someone did a study, and they were only off by 3.8 times the amount of iron. So they said there was 4 units of iron, and it was closer to 16. So it's a big change. And then what's the number one nutrient deficiency on the farm? It's copper. For 80 years, copper has been deficient on the farm. And the fastest way to take copper out of the soil is to use Roundup. So real quick, we've heard of Cain and Abel. I didn't know Cain was a grain farmer. Abel was a shepherd. It's pretty cool, right? Cain and Abel. And our metabolism is ruled by this yin-yang mechanism. It's absolutely fascinating. It's based on iron, vitamin D, sugar, estrogen, angiotensin, and this pathway called mTOR, it's a very powerful pathway that runs on iron. And then we have an opposing pathway based on copper. It's called AMPK. You've never heard of these pathways before. Your doctor doesn't know what they are either. It's just the most basic piece of physiology that runs our body. And what's important, though, is that Cain, inside our body, kills Abel. mTOR snuffs out AMPK. It's a big deal. It likes to stop AMPK. Iron activates it. Copper stops it. Let that sink in. Copper stops Cain from killing Abel. And copper activates AMPK. So why don't we know about copper? There's no money in healthy humans, right? This is the simplicity and the enormity of the root cause protocol, because we focus on lowering iron and increasing bioavailable copper. That's really what we're trying to do. So that, in my humble opinion, the true pandemic that's decimating humanity is called metabolic syndrome. You may have heard that term. And historically, it was based on heart disease and lipid dynamics, hypertension, and diabetes. But it's now been expanded to include dementia, cancer, PCOS, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's only affecting 40% of Earthlings on the planet. 40%. 3 billion, with a B, people are struggling with metabolic syndrome. So the challenge is, what happens when the liver cannot make key chemicals that are based on copper? That's where the real breakdown is. And so this is just building on that. These next two slides are very complicated, but this is going to be the final, okay? So take quick notes. You ready? All I'm trying to do here is let you know there's a lot of information out there, but basically what AMPK is doing is making sure that there's balance in the body. That's all. Make sure there's balance. Really, really important. And it's easily knocked out by iron. And this is the second complicated slide, and then we'll move on. But what it's doing is telling you all the different things that support AMPK. Again, Cain killing Abel. Iron feeding mTOR. Get rid of iron, you don't have a problem. But here's the part this is when I began to wake up and realize this is a critical gene that gets fired off when there's a lot of sugar in the diet. And it's based on glucose, as you would expect. Turns out that sugar activates this pathway. Because you've never heard of the pathway, you're not worried. It should be an oh my God moment. It's a frightening thought that sugar has the same impact as iron on Cain. Really kind of scary. So I was curious. I went to Google and I said, I wonder if sugar, I wanted to just verify, does sugar actually activate mTOR? And what I found was this study. mTOR is a key protein involved in the metabolic effect of simple sugars. And this was the article that almost knocked me out of my chair. Because it basically says that, in fact, mTOR responds to sugar. mTOR is a beast of a pathway in the body. the central role of mTOR in the metabolic effects of excessive simple sugar consumption. So basically what we're seeing here is mTOR. This is how we get insulin resistance. They really have broken all this stuff down. There's no puzzle out there. Oh, you've got type 2 diabetes. They know exactly what the pathways are that are involved. Yep. So you study these dynamics long enough, you can't help but begin to see a pattern between the changes in our food environment, the hyper iron supplementation, fortification. It'll say enriched flour. Guess who's getting rich? Not you. High levels of added sugar, seed oils, and the undeniable rising levels of chronic disease. It's not a mystery, and it's not complicated. Wonderful book about Otto Warburg, famous scientist, clinician. If you get a chance, read it. It's one of the best books I've ever read. But what I learned from it is that cancer, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic syndrome all have a relationship with sugar. I never knew that. And it's all based on insulin resistance. My question is are the cells insulin resistant or are they just iron ravenous? And I think it's more the latter. But again, we all get very protective about the sugars that we eat because we like our sweets, you know, have our chocolate at the end of the day, have our fruit with breakfast, whatever. We're all guilty. We're all involved in that. But we've lost balance as a society. And so I came across this picture of little sugar cubes that were skulls. I thought that was cute. Let's call a spade a spade. So I came up with this idea that sugar is white iron. And I thought, I'll just see if it's true. I had no idea I might be right. So I Googled hyperglycemia, and this is a protein, it's an iron protein that's wicked. There's no other word for it. Hepcidin is wicked. With hyperglycemia stimulation, hepcidin expression decreased, leading to iron overload in the cell. Let it sink in. See, you don't know what hepcidin is. I don't blame you. Thank you, Justin. Neither does your doctor. I gave a talk recently I was doing a podcast, and the physician I was talking with said, Morley, I can't help but think that there aren't any doctors on the planet that know what hepcidin is. And he's probably right. Hepcidin expression decreased, leading to iron overload. That's a serious situation in your body. So I kept digging, and this study by Dr. Hsu and Dr. Mayo, hepcidin as a key iron regulator mediates glucotoxicity. Ooh, that means sugar's bad. But it's affecting pancreatic beta cell dysfunction. Decreased hepcidin expression increased iron absorption by upregulating the receptor for iron in the body. Folks, that's not good, especially in a body that doesn't have copper. And the meme that runs the planet is, you're anemic and you're copper toxic. And the truth is just the opposite. You have a whisper of copper in your body, and you're drowning in iron inside the cell, and it's not showing up in the blood work because it's stuck in the cell. You follow me, Faith? You with me? Your iron is not where it's supposed to be because you don't have enough copper. This will be on the final two. But hepcidin is produced in the liver, and a lot of things will either cause it to be downregulated or upregulated. Don't worry about it. But what's important is high fructose corn syrup and high sugar are going to cause it to get downregulated, which means iron's then going to build up in the cell. That's all you need to know. And you can teach this to your doctor. It'd be good for them to know this. So this became a game changer when I understood that about sugar. But what's really important, if you remember nothing else, and you can have a lot of fun with your doctor about this, you can tell him, Doctor, did you know that hepcidin rises when copper drops in the body? And what you want to do is you want to be sitting eyeball to eyeball with them when you bring this up. And you want to watch this very slight rise. They're going to kind of rise out of their chair. And that's their sphincters tightening up when they realize you know more physiology than they do. Now what's interesting is that caffeine, red wine, estrogen, you can get lost in this, but the key is when copper is deficient, hepcidin rises to stop iron recycling. That's a big deal. And in the same way that for 65 years, we chased cholesterol. LDL, HDL, good cholesterol, bad. How big is your cholesterol? Is it sand? Is it cotton balls? We got so distracted for 65 years. Only to find out, you know what causes heart disease? Iron. And it oxidizes cholesterol. It was never the cholesterol. It was the iron that got out. And, oh yeah, they forgot to tell us about copper. What regulates cholesterol? Copper. They forgot to tell us that. And so, in the same way, don't get lost in what's down-regulating hepcidin, what's up-regulating. Just remember that copper is needed to keep hepcidin normal. And so, there's positive regulators, negative regulators. Well, hepcidin is a negative regulator, like Mike Ditka. Dick Bucket, excuse me. What am I thinking? Dick Bucket. It's right there. It's right there. And I said Mike Ditka. Okay. So we want to get rid of the negative regulators, and we want more quarterbacks. And this is a very important copper protein in our body. We need more Tom Brady. If there was one decent quarterback from the Chicago Bears, I would have put it up there. So there's a very precise mechanism. Again, this is on the final. Don't worry about it. Your question about fructose. I got it. What about fructose, right? Well, fructose, we get fructose from our diet, but we also make fructose in our body. I just learned that 2 weeks ago. This book, again, I know you have extra time. It's a great book. Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. Mind-blowing research by Dr. Richard Johnson. It's incredible what he's uncovered. So just remember that high fructose causes systematic iron deficiency. So when you present low iron in the blood, that's systemic iron deficiency. That's what you've got, right? But you have iron stuck in your liver, Faith. And guess what that's affecting? Your pancreas. And iron shuts down the pancreas. And that's what that article was that I had you send yourself. The key is, this is the basis of all the assertions about anemia. It's because the doctor doesn't know that iron's stuck in the tissue. They're just looking at the blood work. Bozo no-no. But here's even worse. The iron that's stuck in our liver, nobody knows about it. And I'm working with 2 physicians down in Miami who are using MRIs to scan different organs to be able to grade how much iron is in our organs. Mind-blowing. The assertion that you're anemic is an absolute lie. The fact that we don't know how much iron is in our organs is a sin, in my humble opinion. And so, real quick, I think I only have 2 more slides. This is talking about iron. Again, back to your question about fructose. It's okay, right? No. What fructose does is it blocks the production of leptin. You may have heard that term, but what leptin does is it regulates your appetite. And when you have decreased leptin, you have increased appetite. So this is the source of the problem in society, and iron is shutting this down. Iron is causing people to have a voracious appetite. And because there's so much iron in our body and we don't have the copper to release the enzymes that are supposed to be expressed in our pancreas, that's where all the metabolic problems are coming from. So iron dysregulation causes insulin resistance and leptin resistance. You may have heard those two terms. It's all from excess iron. And why is the iron in excess? Because there's not enough copper to regulate it. And this is just another article that talks about the regulatory connections between iron and glucose. There's increasing evidence that systemic, but also cellular iron and glucose metabolic pathways are interconnected. This review presents relevant data derived primarily from mouse models. We would be the mice in these models. In addition, it discusses iron and glucose metabolism in the context of human disease. And what they do is they lay it out. They exactly lay out the relationship between iron and sugar, and it's amazing. The overexpression of this particular protein preserves insulin sensitivity and reduces oxidative stress, causes expansion of adipose tissue, and it stimulates the expression of a very important fat hormone called adiponectin. What this passage is fumbling over is the fact that iron restriction ensures insulin sensitivity. Period. That's it. Lower your iron to increase your ability to work with insulin. Please recall from Ravenous that all chronic conditions are the result of insulin resistance. Take a deep breath. So what the protocol does is there's a series of starts, eat food like your ancestors did. Weston A. Price is a wonderful guide if you want to know how to eat. Become aware of your stressors. Your sugar intake is one of your stressors. We're all guilty of it. And there's a series of process steps, one of which is donate blood regularly. It's very, very important. And please stop by, it's actually 102. And unfortunately, this is sold out. I sold out in 1 hour. At 10 o'clock, I had no more, but I got tons of books. All right, thank you all very much for coming. Yes.